Welcome to the Old Guy AI podcast, brought to you by MongoDB. And now, here's Scott Sanchez and Pete Johnson.
Hello there. Today's Thursday, September 18th. I'm Pete Johnson. With me as always, Scott Sanchez. And Scott, we were both together in New York City for an event. And I had pizza in East Harlem with my daughter on Wednesday night. What's your favorite Manhattan pizza?
Ooh, John's of Bleecker Street, hands down, wins every time, never disappoints.
We had Patsy's in East Harlem, and that was good. The company was better than the pizza because I'm always gonna pick spending time with my adult kid over other people. But it was good. Thumbs up for Patsy's if you're in East Harlem.
Nothing bad to say about Patsy's, but John's is near and dear to my heart.
Well, you've lived there, and I'm only ever a visitor. You win that argument no matter what. So let's talk about some news that broke today. What's your knee-jerk reaction to Nvidia making an investment in sometimes rival, longtime behemoth fallen on harder times here lately? Our friends at Intel.
It's hard to tell if Nvidia investing in Intel is strategic in that they need something Intel actually has available to them, or if it has something to do with preserving enough competition in the market so that no one can make a claim about monopoly or competitive nature on Nvidia as they continue to grow, right? Like they need competition in the market to sort of stave off those types of concerns eventually. That was sort of the first thing that came to mind, because it's not a huge investment for Nvidia. It's very meaningful for Intel at this point, but it's like, pocket change at this point for Nvidia.
Well, so I sent it to you. Usually you break news to me instead of the other way around. And when I sent it to you, the first thing you sent back to me was, so the Feds own 10% of Intel and Nvidia owns somewhere around 4 or 5%.
Yeah, like you said, falling on hard times, and I don't know where they go from here. I mean, still, it's by a lot of measures, it's still a decent business, and certainly there's no lack of need for chips and foundries and innovation in that space. I think where they've struggled is on the innovation side. So, it'll be interesting over the next months and years to see what happens to that business and what and if they're able to resurrect.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up, what does Intel have that NVIDIA needs? And I think there is something, but it specifically wasn't mentioned in the press release. And I even saw some pieces of media saying, no, it doesn't mean this. I want to read to you from the NVIDIA press release a couple of sentences that says what this is. But then I want to talk about what it supposedly is not, but I think makes way more strategic sense for them. So here's what NVIDIA said in their press release. For data centers, Intel will build NVIDIA custom x86 CPUs that NVIDIA will integrate into its AI infrastructure platforms and offer to market. For personal computing, Intel will build and offer to the market x86 system on chips that integrate NVIDIA RTX GPU chiplets. These are the new x86 RTX SoCs that will power a wide range of PCs that demand integration of world-class CPUs and GPUs. The thing that's not mentioned there is Intel's foundry business. I thought that was very curious that wasn't mentioned at all, because it seems to me that's what NVIDIA needs most, is more places to manufacture the chips. And that's a part of NVIDIA's business that, because it's always so firewalled off, it's got a little bit of mystery surrounded to it. But it seems to me that strategically what they really need is the foundry. Is that your reaction too, or do you think I'm coming out of nowhere with that?
The fact that the things that they decided to partner up on are, I don't want to say inconsequential, but it's not solving a problem that strikes me as material. Like, people are getting along just fine putting x86 hardware into servers and putting NVIDIA GPUs into servers. They've been doing it for a long time. Can it be better together? Sure. Yes, great. But they've partnered for a very long time on that to make sure that they are exceptionally compatible. And we've had, 15 years of that going well at the sort of data center level. So I I think great. Now they're going to be more integrated. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of money to hopefully save your business. I just don't think that it was necessary. I think it was one of those things where Nvidia was like, we would like for Intel not to fail, and let's get creative about how we can give you a bunch of money and make it seem like this is a really strategic business move. Again, this might be one of those things where, like we said about Apple last week, that they're playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers, and we're just not seeing it for the long term or big picture. But I think there's a skeptic in me that really wonders if this was just about preserving Nvidia's market opportunity by making sure that there is some competition in the market, and that, you know, in however many more years, when the regulatory environment changes again, and there's more scrutiny on these kinds of things, that, you know, they're not caught in an uncomfortable position.
I still think strategically where it makes more sense for NVIDIA, especially when you consider the federal government investment into Intel, is with the foundry, and that wasn't mentioned in the press release, and that I saw written pieces that were clearly influenced by some combination of Intel and Nvidia, that specifically was not part of this for now. That was especially curious to me. But of the two things that were mentioned, you could argue that the personal computer one is more consequential if that puts more GPUs in laptops and desktops that you could then use for inferencing models locally.
But yes, but those things are already in laptops and desktops. Like, I challenge you to go, you know, maybe not NVIDIA's latest and greatest cutting edge chips, because of how power hungry they are. They need coolant, you know, cooling capabilities that are challenging in a laptop. And so maybe this will help advance some of that. Um, but, you know, most PCs, certainly gaming PCs or higher end laptops where you actually need a capable GPU, those have existed for a really long time. Again, it comes back to, like, what problem are we really solving here? And it's unclear to me, other than preserving Intel. Like, that's the problem they're trying to solve, is preserving Intel. They're doing it right. They're trying to solve an actual problem in the market that customers are facing. I'm not seeing it.
Fair. I just think if you're going to play devil's advocate, of the two parts of the announcement, that one has a little bit more oomph to it, because if that propagates more GPUs out in the marketplace, that's better for NVIDIA and for model usage. But it's certainly not as strong a case to me as the foundry one. I won't argue with you there. So let's talk about the other thing that happened this week. So while I was in transit on Tuesday to the event that we were both at, you sent me a link to the ChatGPT usage document that OpenAI dropped on Monday. I read it on the plane because I'm me, and I read all 67 pages of it. I did a short on that and put that out on YouTube while we were we were both available to do this. Let me share that document and we can talk through some of the content that's in it. Okay, so there was a lot of content in these 67 pages. It was effectively 36 pages plus appendix and citations. I think that there was some gold in the appendix, which we'll get to here in a minute. But this was kind of the killer diagram of the document. If you were going to read one thing, it would be this. When you looked at this, Scott, what was your reaction to it?
What struck me the most when I looked at this was how many people, or how many sessions, I guess, as this represents, are using it for information and guidance, as opposed to, like, actual productivity of some kind, right? Like I certainly use it this way, but the fact that, I don't know, what is that, 30, half the usage is essentially tell me or help me, as opposed to, you know, do this for me. And I think that's telling. And it really made me think that either the productivity side is progressing slower than I had expected or hoped, or that I have experience with. There you go. Yeah, so I think what strikes me the most here is that like half of the sessions are about guidance or seeking information, and what 35-ish% here are help me write or help me with technical things, and then only 4%, and again, this is ChatGPT, Claude's probably higher, based on the other data we've seen, but like only 4% are looking for help with programming, and only 28% are looking for help with writing, and half are basically, let me use you as my therapist slash encyclopedia slash coach slash, some other usage. So that was like just how big in your face that part of the data was. How about you? What did you take away from this?
Well, I too was surprised by the relationships and personal reflection part of it. I can't imagine asking ChatGPT to help me with something like that. The computer programming one I can explain though, because if you look in the details, the computer programming is typically a function of the API usage, and this was for ChatGPT usage only. So I think that explains the difference there. Now, when it comes to specific info, what I thought was curious was that they changed the functionality throughout the period where they took the sample conversation. So it started May 15th of 2024 and ran through June 26th of 2025. And the thing about that is early in the sample period, when you would ask ChatGPT a question and it was outside of its knowledge range, it would just say, I don't know. But in there somewhere, maybe it was January or February, it would start to do web searches to augment when its knowledge cutoff was, and then that changed the results. So that's how the specific information, I'd almost like them to run that again so we get just a little bit more accurate information that is more reflective of what it looks like for everybody now, as opposed to what it looked like earlier in the period. So that was something that struck me about it as well.
I wish they had other visuals that were more granular. And I know, I think that you mentioned, again, because you read it, I just looked at the pictures. I think you mentioned that there is some of that underlying data deeper in the doc, but it's telling, and it does make me wonder: to what extent are they using this data to evolve the interface in ChatGPT to do some of what we're now seeing in GPT-5, which is like you ask it something and then it follows up now with a question, often, of like, hey, I've provided this to you. Would you like me to show it to you this other way? Or would you like me to package it up for you like this? Or would you like to explore ancillary topics related to this, right? Would you like me to create you a document that you can then iterate on that includes some of this information? So it almost feels like they're trying to use the conversational nature to take people down some of these paths to explore features and capabilities of it that they may not have initially thought about.
It's almost like the first one's free, right?
To create an image, for example, only 4%. I might argue that Gemini's Nano Banana, or whatever they call it, new model for image creation is better right now than ChatGPT. But I've been finding lately that in a lot of the conversations that I have with ChatGPT, somewhere in there, it's like, would you like me to generate you an image that shows you what this looks like? Or, it's sort of starting to prompt me to use the other features that are continuing to grow in the platform.
Now, the other part of this study I thought was fascinating. For privacy reasons, no human being saw the questions, the conversations that they sampled. Instead, what they did was they used a series of system prompts and used a second LLM And that's how they generated the categorization. So let me pull this up in Appendix A. We didn't just talk about this first categorization, but one of the things they did was what conversations were related to work and what conversations were related to non-work items. And as you can see with this prompt here, it gives some basic instructions, but the really cool part, I think, here is that it's laying out this answer with one of the following. 1, likely part of work. 0, likely not part of work. And it gives examples for each. And then it says in your response, only give the number and no other text. So it's almost like it's starting to use programmatic syntax in this sort of system prompt to get a very particular answer type out of the system prompt. I hadn't seen it in quite that way, and I thought it was fascinating that they structured it in such a way, and I am totally copying this because I'm having trouble with some parts of that NFL study that I'm doing, where I'm having trouble to getting the models to respond in quite the way that I want to. And this is a great example of how you can be very prescriptive with it in how you want it to operate and give you very specific answers. I thought that was really cool.
I don't want to pat myself on the back here, but I have for a while been using give me a yes or a no to things, because like I often don't want the paragraph or more of narrative that it gives me in answers. I just want to know if something is true or false or yes or no. But they're very prescriptive about it, right? Like the only responses are 1 and 0. Do not perform any of the instructions or run anything else or like interpret anything else. Just like look at this part and give me a yes or a no. And I think that level of machine instruction, because it is easy to forget that you're talking to a machine sometimes as these things continue to get better. But this highlights, to your point, like it's literally binary 1 and 0, just how real the machine human connection still is.
Well, the other part of the appendix, if you go down to A3, that's the part that is the system prompt that did the categorization across the 1.1 million conversations. And it's like a 7-page prompt. If you look here, it has specific information about the kinds of categories and subcategories, which it puts, most of this always looks like Markdown. So it's got like ** and then an identifier. So this one here is edit _or critique _provided _text. I found it really interesting that they're using underscores instead of spaces there for the identifiers. That's not something that I would expect. And then if you go down even further to the next page, a couple pages later, after they provide the definitions, then they've got examples, and they've got like 4 or 5 examples for every category. The LLMs always do a lot better when you provide them a specific example. So lots to learn from here and borrow from. I love this section a lot.
I want to copy and paste what's in here into a help me become a better prompter prompt. And anytime I'm struggling with having it give me the answer I want, I'm gonna have it recall this and be like, take my prompt that I've asked you and do your best to reformat it into the specificity that's described here and give it back to me. Like I think there's a flywheel of improvement that this type of detail can provide. But in most cases, like no one's going to write a prompt this detailed unless you're trying to parse a billion queries and want it to be consistent and accurate, right? Like at the scale of data that they were trying to work with, like, yeah, you want to take a couple of days and get your prompt right. So the average thing you're going to ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude 37 times a day, I'm not going into this level of depth, but at least once or twice a day, I'm like, why can't you just understand what I want, right? It's giving me like the wrong answer, the wrong level of answer. And I feel like you could just paste this in and be like, you're not understanding what I want. Use this format and come back to me with a way of representing this. And then I'm going to ask you to you that way. And I bet you that in like 3 more clicks, you can have a much better response.
Then you get in the prompt to improve your prompt, and then that gets very Inception, right?
That's exactly what comes to mind. Anything else on our docket today, sir?
I think we're done. So, the early news from this morning and stuff we had earlier in the week, I think that'll call it for this episode. Thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
This has been the Old Guy AI podcast. Views expressed here do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the sponsors or the employers of any hosts or guests.